welcome everyone. This is our 8th community conversation with Bilingual Montessori, and we're really glad you're here. I'm going to go through more details of our project for those of you that are new here and tell you more about how it all came about. In 2020, many conversations were happening between people that are searching for information about the best practices for Montessorians working with more than one language in their schools. This photo is at the Lead Montessori Conference Open Space Session in Prague in 2019. This was one of those conversations and the origin of Bilingual Montessori. Currently, there's little training to support this work, so everyone is out there on their own, trying to do their best. There's also little research for Montessori schools on this topic and not enough documentation of effective practices, although we do seem to be changing that as we are gathering more people together. As you are here, you know there are a lot of challenges down this path. The number of schools and educators finding themselves in this situation is growing, and so is the community that we are creating with you. Our founding partners applied for and received a 3-year grant to support our project, and the project was launched in February 2022. Some of you submitted letters during this time to support us, stating you feel this project is very needed, and we thank you for that. We also want everyone to understand that from the very beginning, this has been a community project. Our approach to this challenge comes from the whole school perspective, as we work with the specific needs of different groups that make up a school, namely the Montessori guides, the language specialists, and the school leaders. With those groupings in mind, we are developing the grant outcomes in 3 areas. First, we're creating a design process field guide that will share effective classroom and administrative practices from Montessori schools and second language acquisition information for supporting the goal of bilingual education. Second, we will be offering a 3-level online training course based on this field guide for those wanting to build or improve a bilingual Montessori school with support. And third, we're creating a community, this community for all of us to engage, practice, and support each other through different activities such as our community conversations, our social media groups, and the Bilingual Montessori website. This Erasmus project is formed from partners in 4 different European countries. Our team consists of a group of carefully selected experts who have joined across Europe to work towards our bilingual Montessori outcomes. On our team, we have Mirka Lichkova, who's the founder and executive director of the Montessori Institute of Prague, as our project coordinator. Dr. Mary Kay McCabe, who founded Madrid Montessori School in 2006 and in 2018 created Learning Ecologies to offer training courses and consulting services for Montessori educators specializing in bilingualism. Maria Smirnova, who founded and operated 4 bilingual schools in Paris and is now supporting others to open schools across Europe. Her French company, Montessori at Work, is a bilingual Montessori partner. Maria brings her interest in design processes and her expertise as a children's house and elementary guide to our project. Lucy Wellstead is the founder and director of Montessori Cordoba International School, a bilingual school in Spain. She represents the Education for Life group as a bilingual Montessori partner organization. Lucy's experience as an entrepreneur and school leader brings important insights for those creating bilingual schools or second language programs. Dr. Aoife Ahern is a professor of language education at the Universidad Complutense of Madrid. She's a bilingual education expert and teacher educator in the area of second language learning, who guides us in our research and provides strong support in the area of second language learning. Lucy Urbanchikova is an experienced ESL teacher and language coordinator at Montessori Schools Andělek in Prague, Czech Republic. She brings her years of experience as an English teacher and strong organizational skills to our project. Myself, Amy Tobias, I joined the team as our project manager. I'm an experienced Montessori elementary guide in some bilingual settings, and I've worked for 6 years as the coordinator of a bilingual education program. And Plamena Koliva joins us as our Erasmus project consultant, who supports us with many aspects of the project along the way. So we're a very strong team together, all working with a lot of passion and enthusiasm to create bilingual Montessori. And each one of you are part of our journey, so please keep in touch with us by our website and social media. Let us know your needs and feedback on the project or any questions you may have. And we'd really like to hear from you. So now I'm going to pass this to my colleague Maria, who's going to give you a brief update about one aspect of our project. Maria?
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everybody. My name is Maria, and today I would like to talk to you about some new features that we have on our website, which is called Notes from the Field. So if you go to our website, bilingualmontessori.com, on the bar, on the top, you will see at the very right, the section called News. This is where we usually publish our newsletters and have some updates. And here we have also this new resource available for our community that is called Notes from the Field. And what do we mean by the field is basically all of you who are out there all across the world in bilingual Montessori settings with all the differences and experience that you're getting there. And the purpose of this section is really to share more information about your expertise and research and share it with the community. So the way it works, for example, right now we already published there a story from Romali, who is our speaker today. And so she's walking through her personal story and how she coped with the lack of research and the different things that she developed herself. It's a very valuable experience that we would like to share with all of you. If you would like to share something that you think is really interesting for the whole community, something about your experience at your location in the school, we would be really very happy to hear about that. And you can send us your write-up or if you have questions about the topics that would be more suitable to hello@bilingualmontessori.com, and we will be happy to discuss with you and publish that here so that all of our followers and community can also share your knowledge and experience.
It's a real pleasure to be able to introduce you to Romali Rosales, who's our speaker today. Romali is from Mexico. She's currently living in the UK, but her experience that she's going to share with us today is from when she was living in Mexico. And like many people, probably many of you in the audience, she was sending her children to a Montessori school in Mexico. And she, well, as we do, you talk to the head of school, and they were talking about wanting to build up an English program, and she offered herself that she had some knowledge and that she might be able to help them in this way. So in 2014, she was made a part-time English coordinator at this school in Querétaro, Mexico, and then the following year, they had an opening in a children's house. They didn't have an English speaker. So again, Romali stepped up and said, I'd be happy to be your English speaker in that environment. And she spent 3 years in that environment. So obviously, since this is a school in Mexico that's starting a new English program, these are Spanish native speakers. Although I will say, in general, Mexico has a lot more influence from the US, so English is more present, but this is not something, English hasn't been formally introduced to the children that she is working with. And so Romali as well is a natural born researcher. And so she kept very careful records of the work that she was doing and what was working and what was not working. And so then she realized, wait, I can publish this, I can collect this experience. And she published it as using an action research methodology. And I think it's wonderful that she's going to share this with us today, because I think some of you, well, some have written to me and say, well, I have this experience, how do I document it? And so Romali is going to share with us one way that you could consider documenting the work that you're doing in your schools with the children. And so I don't want to take too much more time. I think that's the basic context of this school. And Romali, well, I should also say Romali now is a trained 3 to 6 guide, but at the time she only had Montessori assistant training. So she also was in that category of professionals who are coming in as an English language specialist, but not yet having the Montessori training. And so that is, well, she offers that perspective of what that can feel like as one is figuring things out. So anyway, so thank you very much, Romali. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy and ready to enjoy sharing with you and waiting for your questions. And I hope you like it. And so I'm going to start off with the presentation.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So, well, this is the talk that we chose for the presentation, and it has progression because I really started as a language specialist just doing English lessons. That turned into having sessions with the second language, and starting outside with just a few children and moving into the classroom. And all this happened along the 3 years that I conducted this study. And if you see how we started and how we finished, it's very different, but hopefully this presentation will make a clear presentation of how that happened slowly. So just about me, I don't want to expand too much into this one because Mary-Kay has said all of this. So I had this educational psychologist background and teaching English as a second language and the research background. I myself have a bilingual family. My kids were born in England. Then we moved back to Mexico, and now we are back in the UK. So also having children in a country where we didn't want to lose our home language was something that kind of made this important to me. And then when we moved back to Mexico, it was the opposite. Their school didn't have a very strong bilingual program, and I didn't want to lose what they could have had we stayed in the UK for them to grow. So I think all this also built into what I did. I had an experience from a very long time of having been an L2 assistant for an infants community. And then I was an English assistant for a children's house. And then I started with what Mary-Kay reported about me working with the school, developing the language program with them, with 2 teachers that we had at the moment. And then the following year, I started this. So I have also this experience of developing language programs, both in Mexico and in the UK, having in here the Spanish as the target language. And I think also that has been really interesting. When I finished these 3 years, I wanted to see what would happen with a different target language. And that kind of brought me here. So this is something that has been in my journey for a long time. And then I trained as a Montessori guide just because I wanted to understand better the pedagogy, and I just love Montessori, so that was the next step to take. So as Mary-Kay said, most of the children were Spanish speaking, and in Mexico, a lot of the people that send their kids to Montessori school, which are mainly private schools in Mexico, or just private schools, I would say, they do speak English, but they do not speak English to their kids. We were the only crazy ones that sometimes were speaking to English to our kids so that they wouldn't lose the English. But that's not what happened, even when the parents have that language. So the majority of children were monolingual Spanish children, but we had 2 bilingual children. So things were different. For example, it took less time for these bilingual children to speak to me in English, and there were some variations, but out of 38 children, only 2 were bilingual. So, so what else? So just, I think this was also the background information. So what I am going to present here, something didn't came up, but these are 3 school years. Okay, so in this presentation, I am going to talk about how these 3 years were split into working periods of 6 months. So every semester, I would consider a working period, and I would just gather all my notes and analyze what had I learned. So reflect on my own practice to decide what adequations I needed to make for the following school year, pass them through the teachers in the classroom, and then with the principal. And then that's how I worked for all these 3 years, like making these cuts, let's say, analytic moments where I looked back and tried to look forward, what needed to change or what needed to remain. So I think this is how this talk will work. We're going to look through these stages, and you can maybe see if you find yourself somewhere. So this also brings the idea that this is dynamic, that I started in a particular place, but then I moved along. So by showing you this table, what I want to tell you is I started for the first year as I was more comfortable, which was being a language specialist giving English lessons. And I was put in a separate classroom just with the year 2 and the year 3 children, and doing English classes as I knew how to do them. So I'm going to talk about each of the stages in a moment. So in this table, you can see the modality. The modality is how it looked like in general terms. So I started with 3 hours a week, 1.5 hours on 2 days that were not consecutive, on 2 separate days. And then I moved into the library when the school needed to grow another classroom. So I was relocated. And then that allowed for me to then say, okay, if I'm in a shared environment with the kids from elementary, why not that environment be the classroom? And so that's when I moved for the second semester of the second year. And it was the third year when this was kind of more consolidated into the second language corner, into the English corner within the classroom. So here we have the main features and the analysis, but they will come again as we go along presenting the stages. So I'll just go ahead. Wait. So the first phase and the initial stage was this second language lessons, the English lessons. So I had allocated times to allow for continuous work with the Montessori materials. I didn't want to cut the activity cycle because from my previous work, that was something that we wanted to keep. So I was doing this early in the morning and after lunch. This is not convenient when you don't have something to do in between. I had things to do and it worked, but it's one of the things that you need to consider in a program. Sometimes you want to be kind of taking care of the work cycle and sometimes it will work, but sometimes it won't. So you need to compromise one way or the other. So this kind of happened here, and I will tell you how we resolved it. So I had these English classes outside the classroom for 45 minutes twice per week. So I started with 2 groups of 12 children each. So that proved to be large groups for what I wanted to do. And so one of the first things that we decided to do was reduce the group size. But by reducing the group size, then we had to have groups coming one after the other, which was an impact for the working cycle. But that's how we decided to do it, and we were in agreement that it was okay. So I was bringing books, some songs, giving presentations about different topics. And by the end of this first period, so we started in August. So by December or November, I said, okay, let's see what the kids remember, right? And I was shocked that they didn't remember much, because it had been so much that, and it was not really kind of linked with many things that they were using regularly. So to me, it was like, right, less is more. So instead of trying to teach about so many things, limit your semantic categories, limit your topics, and go deep into that. So that was something that came out from this realization. I repeated a lesson plan I had, and that's how I discovered, wow, this is as if hadn't happened, right? So, and I also saw the need to have materials to support work, and children started being very clear, and that's why I also consider this an action research, because they were active participants in giving me clues of what worked and what didn't work. So one day I decided to bring this poster with songs that they liked, and then when I didn't bring it, they would say, don't you have those songs with the drawings in them? So I said, okay, so they like drawings linked to the song. So this kind of gave me ideas just from a very basic understanding of what I was doing. And this was the initial phase, like starting off. Then on the second phase, I had this classroom still only year 2 and year 3. This was a decision early on, because I knew from my experience as an infants community second language assistant that younger children would just really take it much easily from the environment. So I didn't want to do something that I knew could be done differently for the younger ones. So that was one of the reasons why I stuck to the older ones. And there was also a limit in the amount of students I could have for the amount of time I had available, given by the school and myself. So I continued with the classrooms outside the classroom, in a different classroom that was an empty room, 30 minutes per week per group. But now I had smaller groups that were eight children each. So that changed a lot the dynamic, because I felt I could do more with smaller groups for what I was trying to do. And I knew I had a preference to work according level and age, which comes from my TESOL background. You either want to allocate children according to what you think are more common interests, depending on the age, or the proficiency they have in the language. So for me, that was very, very clear in the beginning. I didn't feel comfortable with heterogeneous groups. But what I did for this new arrangement of the classes is that I had 2 groups of the graduating class and 1 of the non-graduating class, because I thought this could help me see the difference. Like the ones that were graduating, I could only do so much, right? Because they were leaving to elementary. So, but the ones that were staying would kind of be my students for the following year. So that's why I wanted to have these 2 groups separate from here. And then what I did is I was in these trials that I was doing of what worked and what didn't work. In the beginning, I had some non-variable things that I was always doing as part of the routine that would add context to the language, which were this good morning song, greeting song, goodbye song, and learning assessment. But the variable elements of my session with them would be, sometimes I would give a presentation or a game, or we would read a book or sing. So, and this could vary. Sometimes I would not have one of them, or I would have one and not the other. And during this time, because I had already known that there was a need to develop materials, we gathered together a group of moms that were helping me to do this, because that's a lot of work. Like, I know guides do a lot of materials for their classrooms. So as I found the need of materials to support the work, because it kind of didn't make sense that I was coming up with new things every session when the kids were used to using the same things over and over in their classroom. So I said, maybe I can do something similar than what they do in their Montessori environment. So this was one of the ways of why I thought about having materials. Then the third phase, this was the second year, and the assistant was the same, but the guide had changed. So as I told you before, they needed the room that I was using for the lessons for another classroom. And so I was relocated into a section of the library in the school. And that's where the sessions took place. And the children that had gone out of Children's House and were now in elementary were coming to take books. And they were listening to what they knew from the year before, and also the older children. So having this interaction with other people passing by kind of made me feel confident to say, well, let's see if next semester we can move into the classroom. But I had to experience that, having others around what I was doing, so that I could think of this as a possibility. So again, same type of lessons, but with this more defined structure, year 2 and year 3 groups. I had one with smaller, younger children that were just coming into the groups because they had reached the age that I would admit them. And I had 2 larger groups with children that were new to the school and children that had been with me the previous year. So this was the ratio, like 5 to 3 from previous year and newcomers. And this was really illuminating, in the sense that the children that already had the experience of these lessons, of these sessions, were already very familiar with the routine. So when the kids that were newcomers were saying, I don't understand this, what am I supposed to do? Like, they were kind of waiting for the translation, or they felt that they didn't know what to do. There was always a peer telling them what to do. And because like it didn't took long for them to feel that they knew what to do in this context that we had created of regularity and the way we were working. So also I had started to have like regular materials that we would use, like certain books, certain things to play certain games. And so these went into the classroom. And this is part of my not being a Montessori teacher that was there. So I got the space, which to me was a huge conquest, but the space was kind of a space that was not moving, because the materials were kept there, but they were not being used unless they were taken out for the session. So I would come to the classroom to get the kids, and I would ask to bring this or that was in the shelf, but that was the only use the shelf with the second language materials had in the classroom. So it was not the same use that materials have in a Montessori classroom. But anyway, to me, it was like kind of having a foot inside, which I need to say it felt like a conquest, because English was not necessarily important or as important to the school as it was to me. So all these little conquests that were very subtle, and that I'm very happy that I was able to kind of read what was possible at each time without stepping on nobody's toes was a good way in which this could move forward in a way that was natural and good for everyone, because I was also learning. So I think that made it gentle for everyone. And I also became more confident working with heterogeneous classes. And this was just due to an accident. Like the English lessons and the PE lessons were linked. So sometimes I ended up having huge classes or very little classes because the way I had organized my groups didn't fit with the other part. So then I said, right, what do I prefer? Do I prefer very small classes and very long classes, or do I prefer mixed groups? So that's when I said, okay, right, I'll give it a go to have these mixed groups. But it was kind of a challenge for me that by now I was ready to undertake. So I think that's also something else that I want to share with you, that sometimes you need to be kind of doing what you feel is right for you, for where you are. So I think having this autonomy to decide was very helpful. So when this third phase finished, I could see that the kids that had been with me from the previous year, they were making an outstanding process that I had the sensation that I was not ready for them, either me or the prepared environment, to further their knowledge. They were ready for more, and I didn't really know what that more was, or how could I kind of support that they already knew what the new ones were learning. So there was not this scaffolding for something else. And so that was very interesting to watch, because it made me think about what I needed to change or to prepare for that to happen again naturally. And it also showed me the role of the pioneers with the next generations, and how the social environment also creates a fruitful ground when it is built in this way. And I started to have this uneasiness about using the material, about using the classroom to leave the material. So for me, it was like, I'm just storing my things there. And it didn't seem to be enough. So then for the fourth phase, which was when I relocated into the classroom, that was really a very, very big change for me, because I was not a Montessori teacher. I liked Montessori, but I had never been in an environment like in this role. I had been an assistant in a children's house classroom, but in here I had like my little parcel of the classroom with the English corner. And I was just very observant of what was going on, because I was an adult there, but not in the same way as the other adults in the classroom were. I think for many reasons in this classroom, it worked having 4 adults, because it were 2 guides, an assistant, and myself. I only came there for 2 days, but still was an additional adult. But me being restricted to this area mostly, I think helped for it not to be too much ratio adult children. So I went into the classroom. We had this space that we created around the place where I used to leave my materials. And then I went from 3 to 9 hours, because my idea was just to replicate what I was doing in the library inside the classroom. But very soon I could see how children wanted to come, and I just didn't have enough time to receive them. So I said, well, I'll just be more time available. And that's how I extended the hours I was in the classroom. I did many trials to catch the elders' attention. So because I was no longer in the library, the year 3 children were really free to do whatever they wanted in the classroom, and they didn't necessarily wanted to come. So something that we did is that it was not enforced for children to come to the English corner, So it was really interesting to see what happened with that. And one of the things that happened with the older children is that many of them stopped coming. I think because I didn't have anything else to offer, but also because they were doing big works like the 1,000 chain, and they were writing and doing books. And so if I didn't have something to offer that was kind of equivalent to what they were getting from their environment, of course they would not go. But it kept in my mind as something to think about, like, what is it that I would need to do differently to bring them back, to create an interest for them, that the motivation could just be there. And so that's why I say that I had this observant attitude, because to me that was a new habitat that I was coming to. So I needed to be also very kind of prudent, I would say. That's just the way I felt we did things, and it worked. And so after this, but I became acquainted with the territory, and I liked it. I liked coming to the classroom. So it was a good feel to be part of the classroom in this way. It made sense. It seemed to be a right move for where we were. And so I started having satellite learners. So on the one side, I lost the year 3, and I kind of accepted that as something I could not understand then. But then I started having these satellite ones. So the year 1 were very interested about the language, and they were coming, and sometimes I would offer them to stay for the session, and some would say no, and they would just go because they were just listening and trying to understand what was that new thing that was there in their environment. And that was really, really nice to see. I really liked seeing kind of this difference between the year 2 and the year 3 in regards to this new, this novelty happening in their classroom. So then for the last year, for the 3rd year, I had the English classroom from the beginning, the language corner from the beginning. So I came to set up with the teachers from the beginning of the school year, and I had already developed some of the materials that I could put in the shelves, and everything had a lot more clearer structure. So I asked to have, instead of these 2 separate days, to have 3 consecutive days that I would come, and I would come for 4 hours every day. So the exposure to the language, to the English language also grew. And some of the materials I had been developed and trialed before were now available for independent work all week. So sometimes I would have the teachers or the assistant showing me kind of snapshots or videos of how the children were using these materials either by themselves or sharing it with another one in the classroom. And that was really, really nice to see that they knew how to do it now by themselves and how they were using them. So I had this fixed session structure, which took some of the elements that were variable, but then I had them in a particular way. So we had these memory baskets for vocabulary enrichment, and we had these semantic categories that I had chosen from the start, which were verbs, food that was either fruits, vegetables, or just other types of food, like sandwiches, cheese, like spaghetti, other things. And we had the actions, we had, and they were levels. So each memory basket had 8, and we just played memory because somebody had suggested to use the 3-card cards, but they just didn't work for me. So memory seemed to be the way I was doing this vocabulary that I would then build on. We had the reading time, they could choose a book. We had some games they could choose from. I had a couple of games that they could choose from, and then we would play it together outside the classroom. And this was the way the session went. It also became now a necessity to share information with the guides, because now I was a more present adult in the classroom. By changing from being 3 to 9 to now 12 hours, now we needed to have like other types of conversations. So we had meetings, and we also shared a notebook. So whenever I had to ask something or they had to tell me something and we couldn't get the time to do that, then we would have this exchange of information that was important for us to just stay in touch. Because I would come after they started and would leave before they finished their day. So because I was not there for the whole day, just for the morning. And so for this 5th phase, I said that in the last period, I let them just come or not come or do whatever, but now I wanted to see what the attendance was. So I will show you a graph about the attendance analysis. And also, after having seen that I kind of lost the year 3 children, I retried something with the graduating class that worked in a different way. So this is just to say, sometimes at a given time, something will not work, but that doesn't mean that is not possible. That might only mean that it's not the right moment. But if you keep it there in your notes or in the back of your mind, then you can bring it again when conditions change. So I think that's important for us to remember. And the learning outcomes. And I started to think about learning outcomes. So this I want to show you because it's more statistical kind of thing. And I think it's cool to have also these references. So out of the 38 children that were in the class, some of them came in a period of 25 possible lessons. Of course, consider that sometimes children are sick, right? So, but let's suppose, or they don't come for a reason, but 25 were the sessions that we had during this period. And out of those, some children came 0 and some came 25. So to me, that was a huge difference. And I was trying to understand why, who is coming and why are they coming? So I had this hypothesis in my mind, oh, maybe the young ones are coming, or maybe the year 2 or the year 3, or maybe this or that. I was trying to kind of explain to myself what could explain this attendance. And I, for example, on the other graph that we have to the left, I did this distribution across year 1 to 3. So as you can see, it doesn't really depend on the year. So there are other considerations that make some children be more interested in this area. And that can just be an individual thing. Something that was very clear, for example, bilingual children wanted to come because that was a space available for them to use their home language, the language they use with their mom. So that was one reason. Bilingual children, we had another bilingual children that spoke a different language. She had this natural interest just for languages. And so I could have a lot of hypotheses, but to me, the important thing about this is sometimes data can tell you more, or either to confirm or to say no to what you are assuming is the case. So I think for me, this was important to see with kind of hard data. And also, once that I saw that it didn't depend on the year, then I had to start thinking about other reasons, right? Of why kids were more willing to join or not. For example, the one that came 0 times, this was a new child in the school. So to me, it was just logical that he needed to adapt first to his environment before he wanted to come. So that's just one possible explanation. And then the last phase that I was there, I was thinking about kind of a curriculum. Now that I have done all these things, what would be the right way to kind of face the learning, to face the scaffolding, to do things for the kids that are new, for the kids that have been here for a year, and for the kids that are leaving. So I started to have these thoughts, and I did this differentiated work with the graduating class, because to me, I had thought about these learning outcomes that I wanted to achieve. And here it's also important to consider that the work you do in Children's House sometimes doesn't have a continuity with elementary, and sometimes it does. So when it doesn't, or when it does, then these learning outcomes need to kind of be linked to what they will be able to do in the next level. So I think that was also, I did a differentiated lesson structure and used the materials differently. So for year 3 children, they were the ones choosing certain things about the corner. So that gave them a sense of agency. For the others, and it was the production stage for bilingual children. In here, children started producing language, which was very interesting to me. And I didn't really realize this, but like they now felt confident to talk to me in this other language when they knew how to say certain things, or when they were already bilingual. And this, having this in the social environment, also fostered that other children would join this practice. And so at the end of this school year, I was thinking about the desired exit criteria for the language, for the second language, for each year. And I was starting to explore written language and literacy with the older kids that had already done this in Spanish and that were kind of ready. And I didn't need to do much, because a lot of children were already aware. Some children were already reading the books because they knew how to read in Spanish. So they knew how some words were said. So they were kind of doing the work themselves. And I think this is when we really started the transition into having a bilingual environment, because a lot of oral was already happening, especially compared to the previous stages. And well, this was the end of the research project. Then I moved to the UK to see how it would be for a different target language. So it was an unfinished process, but I think it was one that started slowly and gradually became more solid. So I think that's something that I wish that some schools could allow themselves to do, like to grow it naturally and organically from where they start. And sometimes you need the support of the teachers, of the principal, in this case of the parents. I had the possibility to develop these resources that I made. So all this makes it possible. So, and sometimes it's just you doing your best with what you have. So I think that's about it. So thank you very much. And I'm ready for your questions. I hope it was not too rushed, but I know it was a lot of information.
Molly, that was wonderful. I'm sure that we have some questions here, but and once we go through these, we can also open it up for more questions. But thank you so much for sharing that experience. And I think one of the things that is really that you made very clear is how things evolve according to you learning, and also the children responding, or the space that you were physically in then generates a different response from the children. And yeah, that all of this is so dynamic. I think it's really important for all of us to remember that all these different factors really do make a difference in what's happening with the children. There's a question from your friend and colleague Birgitta. She says, Romali mentioned learning assessments that she carried out at the end of each input session with the children. What kind of assessment was this?
So for example, when I started the English lessons outside the classroom, if I had done a presentation about a particular topic, because I saw it as topics, then I would ask the child before they leave into their classroom to do something using what we had seen. So if we had seen a vocabulary or a kind of drill around something, I would kind of ask to remember what we had seen during the presentation. And that way I could see if they had got it or no, or where were they, if they could do it or they couldn't do it. So this is how I did this type of assessment, just to see if it had been effective, what I had tried to do for the lesson.
Right, kind of like a spot check. Okay, greetings from Romania. I would like to know how to do the small activities like singing songs in an English corner without distracting other children, if the class is small. Any tips, Romali?
Well, I had a separate, this classroom was big, yes, and I had a section. So in this section, we didn't sing that loud, but that's why we decided to do the games outside, because the games could be disruptive for the children working inside the classroom. So maybe, and it also helped that I had smaller groups. So when I moved into the classroom, one of the trials was, how many children can I have when they come to the session? So we moved from 6 to having 4 at a time. So having these smaller groups also helped for the volume, I would say. Yes, and I think we just didn't sing that loud. We did sing the songs and it was enjoyable, but we didn't have this problem. I don't know why, but what I can think is I can see it related maybe to what we actually had to do for the games. Like the games, we decided as the adults in the classroom that games were to be played outside. They could choose them inside, but we would take them outside just because of this disruption, kind of not wanting to disrupt other children, and I still want to enjoy the game.
Yeah, exactly. Another question from Brigitte. What was the acceptance of the SLA, second language acquisition materials, in the classroom outside of the target language input time? In other words, when Romali wasn't there. And did this acceptance and independent use of materials change over time?
Yes, I think especially for example, something that I noted is that older children would want to be the English teacher to the younger ones. So they already knew the songs. So something that was, sometimes they would choose a little one and bring him to have that process of singing the songs with them or to them. Right? So I didn't see it, except one day that I couldn't speak. So I had to go to work. My voice was not working. So I said, I'll just go anyway, just to observe. So that was a really fun day that I got to see what happened when I was not there. And so I saw how they were using it. So for example, we did adequations for the memory baskets. When I was there, I could play with the 4 kids that came. But when they were on their own, they were playing in pairs. And something that happened in the beginning is that they would play it in Spanish rather than in English. But then the assistant knew that she could remind them to use the language. Like these are the vocabulary baskets for English. So remember, we play these in English. And so it was just, and the kids remembered. So I think sometimes they needed that in the beginning, but I think they were independent. So for me, it was really a surprise to come this day and see how the corner didn't require me as much, because we had developed the procedure of the use of the materials in a way that was kind of logical. And I think I have to thank the teachers, the Montessori teachers, that kind of guided me in this process. I knew about the criteria of the Montessori materials, but that had to be trialed, like for me, over and over and over. So I think the acceptance, also the positionality would be important, because the year before I had coordinated the school program. So that gave me kind of a different status to everyone's size in a way. And I think that is important. Sometimes I cannot generalize, but sometimes specialist teachers do not have that kind of authority or leadership position for whichever reason. And that's why I said you kind of conquest territory, like because you when the teachers want the second language to be something for their children, then they will be more open to have you, to listen to you, to guide you, to collaborate with you. When they feel that you are kind of an invasion and that you are kind of wanting to put the language before the Montessori, then that will be a battle. And so that's why it has to be kind of a shared common goal, a shared space, but also with respect of what each one is doing. So I think I was just grateful for the teachers that to me this is kind of part of my Montessori journey, where I was doing my big work by doing this. And so the guides that were in that classroom were letting me do that big work. So just they were guiding me, but they were giving me the space, they were giving me what I needed. So I was not a Montessori teacher then, but I was having kind of a Montessori experience. So, and this is also why I wanted to publish my paper before I became a Montessori guide, because to me, it's following the child and following like this kind of urge to do this big work was what made it happen. And yes, I just wanted to share it because I thought it was a nice love story that we had the chance to experience together.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of big work, the next question is about third year Children's House children that are going to transition into taller or elementary, that had more or the same amount of English. Did the third year children have more or the same amount of English? I guess means referring to the younger children or the children already in taller, I'm not sure. And were they reading and writing in English?
So for example, for the last year, the third year children, they needed to have an extended welcome routine. Like just saying hello was not enough. They could do a lot more. So we kind of had topics and we kind of started having conversations that they could be part of in a different way than just with a drill, let's say. And so we incorporated, that's why I said a differentiated session, because they would be asked for more challenging production, let's say. And some children for some children were easier than for others. So you cater for that. And sometimes I also put there's like flexi spaces, because some young children could be in this advanced class, like bilingual children. They could join this class if I had spaces. So I think this flexibility is, were they reading and writing? What changed, for example, for the older children that could read already, is that instead of having two memory cards with the image, I would have the image and the writing, so they could match that using the written language now.
Well, Alejandra, the person who asked the question, she has her hand up. I will just have her open her mic and explain more in detail what she had in mind. Hi, Alejandra.
Hi, Romali. Hi, Mary Kay. Thank you so much. My question has more to do with those third year students in Casa de Niños who are transitioning to taller, and if taller also had ESL classes. So that was the end of their English journey in Casa de Niños?
Yes, so that's what for me it's really sad. Like for me, this has to be a whole school approach, because then if they don't use the language, you might create a very strong project or program for Children's House. But if that is not first fostered forward when they go into elementary, then it's kind of lost. And they had everything to carry on. So, but that has to be like when I stopped being the coordinator of that of the English program, the school decided to bring an outsourcing for the elementary, because parents in elementary are more worried that their kids will have the English level to go into bilingual secondary schools. So one way to resolve it for some schools can be that one, to have the the language schools coming into the school and teaching just English lessons in the beginning of the school day, for example. No? And so so we didn't have the same thing. The year that I coordinated, we had 2 girls doing children's house and lower elementary, and upper elementary and teens. Had these girls stayed, maybe by the time this could have happened, the program would have developed. But I think something else is that you need continuity, and you need key people to see it grow and to develop together. And if it's a collaborative thing that you do, then that's much better, because then you get the feedback from the other specialists in different stages that are thinking about this, right? How is it that what I'm doing here is gonna reflect or help or hinder what will happen in a different level in the next plane?
Thank you. We have, the next question is from someone in Bulgaria. She says, I'm an AMI Montessori teacher and have taken upon a position in a Montessori-oriented bilingual children's house. My question is how to help children transition more easily when I'm actually the one who stays in the Montessori cycle while the groups are going to do a Bulgarian lesson. And this is another thing. I invite whoever asked this question, if you want to open up your microphone and explain a little bit more exactly what is the challenge you're having with this transition. Is it, just that they're not eager to go to their Bulgarian lesson, or kind of what's the...
Hi. Yes, I can explain. Basically, it's a different format and the different way of it's happening. So while we have a Montessori cycle, it can be a Bulgarian teacher who takes the children that they're slightly older before going to reception class, and they're going to have a reception lesson in Bulgarian. That's going to be in a separate classroom. However, I do stay with the rest of the children. That is a totally mixed group. Again, ages can be from 2, and I don't have any bilingual children. They do understand a bit of English, but I just feel that this transition of like others leaving, me staying and trying to make a Montessori cycle still in a foreign language for them. So this is my first year because I have worked in bilingual children's house and 0 to 3. This is the most challenging so far, like how to help them integrate that Montessori cycle and the foreign language. And I heard what you said earlier about the colleagues, and I do agree. And I think maybe this is because this year I'm the only one who's Montessori trained. So yes, I'm just find it very difficult.
Yes, I think it's a challenge having 2 things at the same time when they are not proficient yet in the language. So I can tell you about the experience, for example, in Scotland, where I was there, and sometimes I needed to switch language because what was happening required for me to use a language that they could understand. So I was very passionate about using the target language, but sometimes can't. And the same when you have an English teacher. One of the teachers that was with me in the year that I coordinated the school program, she was only English speaking person. And sometimes you have the idea that that's great because children will have to speak the language, but sometimes it's not that great because she misses a lot of the information that goes on
absolutely.
in the language that she doesn't know.
Yes.
So I think this aspect of the adult and of how these transitions are made just needs to be discussed with the team. And it reminds me of the article of Rosa Nova. Rosa Nova did a very interesting project in a school in Chicago. 10 years he was doing this. And he says that when children cannot yet speak the language or understand it, then the environment needs to speak to them. And I think that's a very good way to say it. So you need to create something within what you do. In my case was to have a very structured lesson that gave context to the language in a way that they could get what things meant more easily. But
I do have that. Yeah, I do have that as a cycle, as a circle, as an English circle twice. And I can see how the children have progressed the past few months. They just know few words, but still I think it has a lot, we still need to do more. And I just feel that, okay, I'm doing more and more and more, but I don't know how much more in order to help them develop their second language.
It takes time. I would say it takes time, and they do it fast.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, that's okay.
Thank you. The next question, Romali, is someone wondering about how many hours that you were in the classroom, because you mentioned during the work time or the work cycle. But were you also with the children during any transition times, or did you go out with them in the playground, or were you just in the environment or outside of the environment with them?
Sometimes I would stay, and whenever I was in the classroom, like in the school, I like to play with the children, speaking to them in English, regardless of which year, because they knew I was kind of the coordinator, so I would always speak to them in English. So I had these kind of opportunities to use the language outside the classroom, but it was not part of my time there. Or sometimes when there was a special event for the school that we didn't have like a proper kind of work cycle because we were doing something else, that I would just interact with them just in this other language. I think it can be beneficial, but again, it depends even in school resources. Maybe a school can hire a specialist just for the morning, but cannot pay her for the whole day. And maybe if I was with them for the recess time or other parts of the school day, then for example, in the Scottish school, we did breakfast time in Spanish. So some children that arrived early to the school, we would have the breakfast morning, the Spanish breakfast morning in Spanish. And that was very contextualized. So everything there allowed for us to build this language. And you could see how the children that came to the Spanish breakfast would just be more interested in language when I was in their classrooms, because they were more exposed to it in a very concrete way. So you can try these things. You can do, I have also done in the Scottish school, for example, I organized events because language needs to be relevant and they need to be motivated. So in order to make a language relevant, sometimes you need to create a culture around the use of that language, or something that makes it not just be the language that someone else wants me to learn because they believe it's important for my future, right? Children, and especially in Children's House, I think something that was good for me was that children wanted to know me, to connect with me. So I think the emotional part is also important. For me, it was very puzzling. There were some of the kids that were coming often, I didn't analyze it in depth, but there were like some really good followers. And I think that was because they liked being with me. And I think that also plays in why you go there to do what you do and what they get of the use of the language. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it answers also another question.
Yeah, I think you've touched on several different points there. The next question is about reading skills, that you observed in your talk that reading skills can be naturally transferred from Spanish to English. And this person said, I think it would be helpful that even in an immersion environment to have reading materials in both languages, at least in the case of Spanish, English, which are fairly similar phonetically. Do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I think something that like some of the materials that were pending, because you're always seeing what you need next and you don't always can build it as fast as you would want. So one of the materials that we would have included would be books, like very simple phonetic books that the kids could read or do themselves. Because I think that's also a way in which you can involve them just to do, we had these fruits that we had in the memories, but they could add more things to themselves and just start writing in the other language. But I didn't get that far because in the beginning there was kind of this need for the school to say, right, children need to learn Spanish first and learn it right before we want you to mess around with that. So I think that was important for me to listen and important for the school to be respected on that. So when I was starting to go into that, that was because that was the right moment to do it for everyone. And then we would again have to be very gentle because to me, this was a learning process. I didn't know it. I just knew that I wanted the English to be like I had seen the reading had been for my kids when they were in Montessori. Something that just came natural. And then one day we just were passing a street and they read an ad. So I said, I want that. I want to create this. Like, how do I make English to be like they acquire reading and writing? So that was kind of my vision from the beginning. And it was difficult to implement it because I didn't know enough. I didn't know enough.
And I just a follow-up question, were you doing phonetic awareness activities in English with them? No.
No, but I can tell you that the next person that came after me was a trained Montessori bilingual guide. So something that she was doing a lot of sound games. So she changed the way in which she worked because she had other information that I didn't have. And with the preparation that I had created, then she was able to take it forward with her own expertise.
Interesting.
So,
Thank you. Someone asked about having access to your paper, and yes, we will post a link to Romali's paper in our next newsletter. So everyone who wants to read through it can do that. And also, we have a few more minutes. I'm wondering if I thought there might be a question about the actual action research method, if anyone is curious to know a bit more about that. We do have a couple of minutes, or if you have any other questions that have come up as you've listened to Romali. I'll just give you a minute.
and I think I have maybe an invitation, Mary Kay. So the invitation is, well, I have this interest in knowing practitioners or teachers' experiences in their journeys. So if you want to share your story, share it with Bilingual Montessori, but also share it with me. And another invitation is Brigitta and I have been, are very happy that we were accepted for a workshop for the AMI conference in Thailand. So if you want to share something, we want to be also the voice, not just for ourselves, but for all the people in the ground doing their bit. So if you have anything like materials or things that you think might be important to share with others in this place, just get in touch. And I can tell you about the action research, but this was just an invitation before people start leaving.
No, and just can you just specify
Sorry.
what you and Brigitte are going to be doing at the conference, at the Congress? Is there a particular focus or topic?
Yes, well, it's a workshop. It's a workshop in which we are going to show different types of materials. And we're going to talk about the criteria for designing these second language materials. And we're going to move into talking also about this autonomous learner that Brigitta is an expert, and how you move from more contextualized use of language to more creative ways of using it, and how that has to do with motivation and having this autonomy to, yeah. Do you want to add something, Brigitta?
Yeah, yes, and the preparation and the guidance and the materials it takes to enable that transition to take place. We have 90 minutes and we're very happy.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes.
We'll make sure to keep promoting that so people are aware that that's something they can take advantage of at the Congress this summer. That's really great news.
My paper started like that, a manuscript describing what I had done, and then because I had all these notes and I had been very systematic on keeping those things, then I was able to do it as a paper, but it really started as a narrative, like where did I started, what happened in the way, and where did I ended up. So, and that's valuable.
And I just want to, sorry, I just want to read a comment from someone who had to leave early, who says, I would just like to say I've found these latest community conversations where we're hearing directly from the L2 guides and how they work in practice in the classroom, their interactions with the children and other guides, and all of the ideas has been absolutely fantastic for me. I've worked over 10 years as the L2 native English speaking in various rooms, 0 to 3 and 3 to 6. And it's been really helpful to hear other guides expressing what I've observed and experienced myself. The good and the more difficult sides of being an L2 guide. Thank you very much. So from Kathleen Music, who's actually is working in Mexico. So that's nice feedback for all of us to hear, that this, what we're doing is meaningful. So if you have anything else, Romali, that you wanted to share?
Yes, maybe the action research that we do in Montessori, it's very much in line with the observation core that Epstein proposes. So it's observe, obtain, connect, obtain, engage, and reflect. So these are the areas. So when I was writing the paper, I realized, oh, I can do this because I have done all these things. I have this connecting question. How can a second language be acquired in this natural way in a Montessori environment? Then I had this obtain all the information I can about it from the ground, and then reflect and engage. Reflect is like, how do I use this, the work that I do, and how do I, even sharing is part of the engaging with the topic. And so if you follow this kind of observation core, yes, there, I did this observation workshop based on what I learned from my research. So that's something that I also can put outside for you to consider if you are interested in doing research, which not everyone is.
No, not everyone is, and not everyone has to, but people who are motivated but need some structure and some inspiration, it's great to be able to offer this information. So I think now, okay, there is now questions. I would be interested in conducting my own research where I work. Are there any guidelines I could follow for assessment, or how to go about selecting parameters to measure?
So for me, I think the observation core is a good starter. And then how to use the parameters. For me, this was like a mixed research. So I showed, for example, the attendance analysis, because that's more statistical. And you also gave me information. But really, you go about with, or I went about with whatever made sense, that what you want to explore further. So for example, sometimes I would choose that, okay, I'll analyze songs. Do songs have something to them? Like the language they contain, the difficulty they have. Like I tried to see what I was using, trying to to analyze it, but you really, for me, it's like, let what you're doing guide you, and go deep in what you think you can understand and you need to understand better, and just research on that topic a bit. Like, for example, when my interest was about songs, then I would just read into Ella, and like some ideas, or for reading, like, for example, my strength is not reading, but I have heard some of the conversations with people that are very experienced in reading. So I would just say, wherever your interest is, find information that will help you better understand what you are seeing. Otherwise, you won't see it.
Right. Well, thank you. I think now we can go to our Menti question, let people write in their aha moment from Romali's talk. Language needs to be relevant. Yeah, that we need to not only observe the child, but the whole environment, everything that's going on. So many more ideas to be implemented. How important to have all the adults on board. Absolutely. Great research that helps. Individuality of the learner. Well, these are all great reflections, and I can imagine many others, because Romali, you went through a lot of different aspects of doing this kind of work, so I'm sure people are also still processing a bit. But thank you. I'm so glad that you were able to come and share a slightly different experience than others that we've heard, plus include the research aspect. And our next week is going to be our last community conversation for this school year. We'll take a break over the summer. And it actually is going to be another L2 language specialist in Lucy, who is with us today, who helps with tech stuff, is going to share her experiences working as the English language specialist at a school in Prague in the Czech Republic. And she's going to have lots of her own reflections about preparing materials, kind of as a precursor to what Brigitte and Romali will be offering at the Congress, and reflections on how to engage children in a second language. So it's great that we have kind of a nice winding down before the summer with similar topics and similar experiences. And then we will be back in the fall, and we will have more talks, and we probably will have even people who've already given a talk will come back, because the breadth of their knowledge is so vast that we want to get everything we can and have this record, because that's the thing too about these community conversations, that we can record them, that they can have a life of their own after this moment today ends, but that people can go back and consult. I think is going to be a huge and important resource within Montessorians who are doing this work with second language. So thank you all as usual, and I hope that you can make it next week to hear what Lucy will have to share, and then we'll see you again in the fall.